Nicolette. And today, Brian and I are here with Rob Tavi. He is the managing director over at IBS Electronics, and he is also the host of Real Talk with Rob Tavi. We've been on his show before, so we're happy to have him with us today.
Well,
How are you
thank
doing, Rob?
I'm great. Thank you both. It's been actually thanks to see you again. Remember we did I had you guys on my show a few months back, and it's so great to see you again. And I'm so excited for you guys, this little new venture of switching it up a little bit on the podcast and being a guest on your podcast.
Yeah. So, Rob, we are kicking off the EDI podcast series, and we're talking to some engineers. So, first and foremost, let's talk about IBS Electronics and kind of that history and your journey over there. We'd love to hear more about the company.
I'll give you a quick 30,000 foot. We can go for an hours from that, but I'll give you a quick little synopsis of how it started. IBS Electronics was founded in 1980 from my father, Robert Tavi. He was a power supply engineer. He worked here in locally in the Southern California region where a lot of power supply companies were located. He started a company called Data Power, and he managed his engineer inventory and all the, he was the basically main man for all the supply chain within the company. And he saw a need. He saw a need that there was a need for a component distributor, a component supply, because he knew the engineering, he knew all the inventory, he knew all the products. He can also knew how from just how they look like. Because back in the day, there wasn't so many different part number SKUs in the 70s there are to today. So he can look at a capacitor or a part number and basically knew everything. He knew, okay, I look at that capacitor, I know what it is, the value, size. He knew what it was. So he's like, okay, I'll start a little distribution company in 1980. And he first called it IBS. He called it, it was International Bobbin Systems was IBS stand for. So that's the funny people don't know. IBS was International Bobbin Systems. Why? Is because the company he worked for was a power supply company, and they did a lot of bobbins, and there was a lot of need for bobbins. So he called it International Bobbin Systems at first. And then he's like, wait a minute, let's make it more generic and let's just make it IBS Electronics. So that's really where it came from. He is really engineering mindset. And then it was from the beginning of selling bobbins to power supply companies.
It's always interesting where companies' names come from or what they stand for, because a lot of times there's so many things we don't even realize, like that acronym or those initials stand for a company.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people know. I mean, we all know what IBS in general public stands for, but everybody's like, "Oh, what is it?" And I'm like, "Well, no, there is a name behind it, and it was international." And it's interesting that you asked that question. Is I did a podcast with my father this year, and I really didn't know the background of it as well, and he really got into detail and says it was International Bobbin System, because everybody thought it was Information Business Systems or what does it stand for?
Right.
But he's like, yeah, that's really where it started, and that was his roots as an engineer and how he created the acronym of the name.
Well, how did you get there, Rob? Well, I mean, was this kind of your childhood dream?
No.
So
let me say my background quickly was, I was always, my father was an engineer. I was always very curious, right? I was very curious as a child. And, growing up in Southern California too, and, there was not so much diversity there, a little more brown skin. It wasn't there, I'm Iranian, so I was trying to figure out what to do and fit into sports or what I can do. And I actually got into the engineering side because I got into remote control cars when I was a kid. I started racing remote control cars at 13 years old. And by 15, I was sponsored and I was traveling to different states, countries, racing for these companies that probably still present today: Team Associate, Team Losi, Team Orion, Futaba, Aerotronics, all these companies. I was sponsored by them, racing their A scale, 10 scale, on-road, off-road. And I was doing my own thing of engineering and building these cars from the ground up, tearing them down. That's really where my head was just racing. I was very competitive nature. Anything I do is competitive. I'm still competitive today. I love racing. I love adrenaline rush. But that was my father or my mother didn't let me have like go-karts. They didn't let me go. They saw what I would get myself into. Like, he's going to get into racing. He's going to hurt himself. So I got into these cars and I started racing until I was in college till 2021. And my father was like, why don't you I didn't want to come to the business. It was like family business. Sometimes, you grew up in a family business, you don't want to get into it, but it was funny. It's like going to the warehouse. I work in the warehouse in the summer times during school. All the components, the diodes, everything we used was in the warehouse. And he's like, why don't you just come and we'll start a company for you to learn the business, another company, like a trading company, to learn the business and find out what's going on. So, I went to school, undergrad, did my MBA, and I worked. And once I did my MBA, I came back. I'm like, okay, my father's doing a lot of business in Asia. That's most of he traveled for 20, 30 years to Asia, Hong Kong, China, Taiwan, just spread that out there. And I'm like, well, when I graduated, I'm like, why don't I come and I will start expanding the operations. We can't just be centralized in US. So in 2001, I really came on board to IBS Electronics and I started traveling. My father took me out to Asia. I started traveling. So ever since then, I've been traveling for about 20 years. I've been traveling to Asia, to different countries, different cultures, and I set up 9 offices in the last 20 years in Asia.
You've now been with IBS for 20 years or so, you said?
20 years.
And now you're doing something really interesting. And this is really one of the things I want to talk about today was you're inviting people onto your show, right? And you're an electronics distributor and you're talking to all these people in the industry. Now, a lot of people might not understand what's really going on there, but you're doing something really powerful. So I really want to talk about what the inspiration behind that was and what you're hoping to achieve there.
Oh, I mean, I could take it back to where I was traveling to Asia. My basic role was to travel Asia, visit all the customers, and expand the operations office. And I really thrived off interpersonal communication, right? Building relationship, going to different facilities, learning the processes, learning what's going on out there. And through late 2019, I had a good friend of mine, Alec Hansen, who really came to me. He's like, why don't you put your life when you travel so much? He's like, it's so fascinating what you do, and put it on like a vlog, or show people what you do or where you go and connect with people. So I started, taking my iPhone and recording some of my trips. I can share some things with you because it'd be funny, like going to India, to factories, like visiting Schneider in India, or going to China, going to Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, and like taking little vlogs and visit, showing the people behind me, showing the buyers, and just everybody was new to it. They all loved it. I was just talking in front of the camera, say, hello, everybody, we're here visiting. And it started from there. And I'm like, okay, I can just, because it starts relating and people can see really what we do. It not only builds connection, it builds credibility. Like, we're a legit company, we're a small corporation. We're a legit company in supply chain. A lot of people didn't know us actually in the US marketplace. So I'm like, how can I build this and show, hey, we're legitimate. We're doing business with large corporations out there. And then all of a sudden, COVID hit. COVID hit, and I can't travel. I haven't traveled for as long as I haven't traveled in 20 years. So how can I connect to people when I can't travel, get in front of them? So at the end of the days, as a book, as I read, was Rehumanize Your Connection, which I did a podcast with the guys from Bomb Bomb, Rehumanize Your World. And I started, okay, we'll just start connecting, and I'll start a podcast or something, video, and I'll just start reaching out to people and talking to people, especially in the States, because all the same time zone right now. So that was easy. Right. And I'll reach out to them and talk to them and say, and learn, because at the end of the day, we build and learn our skill sets, our knowledge, our intelligence from talking to others who are smarter, more experienced, have more wisdom, right? So for me, it was like, okay, how can I connect to these people? So I found the easiest place, go to LinkedIn and just start shooting people messages. And that was really where it all started. And I didn't realize how easy it was to contact C-level people, and they'll be open to talk to me for 15, 30 minutes. And most of the time it was 1 hour around conversation. They didn't know who I was. I really didn't know who they are. And we just had so much in relatable information together. We're humans. We talk about what's going on in the world and also about business. And that's really started building relationships.
And I think, I'm sorry, Rob.
Go ahead, Ryan. Go ahead.
Oh, and I think to Nicolette's point, you're doing something truly unique in the space. Like, a lot of people weren't, like, from a business perspective, weren't pulling together and humanizing their business. And it's one of the core fundamentals of what people call content marketing, right? It's one of those core fundamentals, and it's just it's so perfect for what you do.
Yeah, and well, of course, I did research. There's nobody in. There wasn't that many. The barrier to entry was very low. There was not a lot of people doing what I was doing, and I realized this can really work. But again, it's you're creating a wave of people that are very kind of get defensive of what is he doing? What's going on? And again, a lot of people think like this is not going to work. Or a lot of hey, don't get me wrong, I talk to a lot of C-level people or people in the industry, and like they didn't want to be on film. They didn't think it was the right thing to do, or because they didn't want to talk about their company, either they're public or private. They didn't want to share information. They're like, because I think they all of a sudden it's like their IP or their trade secrets. I'm like, well, I'm not trying to ask you about your trade secrets. I'm trying to ask you about who you are, who's your company, what you do. And it's not about me, it's about you out there, right? It's not about me, it's about you and who you are, and learning and building awareness to the industry of who electronics distribution engineering, distribution, supply chain. And we are the fundamentals of electronics industry. We build all the hardware, all the software operates on. So these days, and everything's electronics. So why don't we build the awareness? Because again, we need to bring in new talent. We need to bring in new people, build the awareness. And I thought this would be a great pathway. And again, I'm not a marketer. I didn't study marketing. I'm a business guy, you know. And everybody's like, oh, you're in marketing. You have all this marketing. I'm like, I'm just learning it as I go. I just put myself out there. I took the risk. Of course, I was nervous and I made a lot of mistakes, but that's the only way we learn is to put ourselves out there.
Yep.
And don't be afraid, because again, we're all living in the world of affirmation and what's going on. But again, as I put in the reps, I'm putting in the discipline, and I'm still not where I want to be, but I'm connecting with professionals like you guys, and this is where we are today.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so much about putting yourself out there, and it's about being human, you know, trial and error, right? And learning as you go. That's it. And you know, everyone makes mistakes in what they're doing as they're learning. That's okay. You know?
Yeah. I mean, it really comes. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I think a real achievement there, you know, and the goal is not even just to connect, right? Now, from a human perspective, yes, and you want to do those things for your business to humanize brands and humanize the industry, but also it's going to draw some attention to IBS, and I think that's what, you know, people are missing about what a smart decision this is, right? Like, you're talking to these people now, people are interested, they're watching, and who's Rob? What's going on at IBS? Maybe I should start working with IBS, right? Do I need to start working with IBS? So it's really, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a really good strategy there.
Yeah, I mean, our DNA these days is on their interwebs, right? Whoever you want to do business with these days is you go to their, you know, if you're my prospect, I come to you, Nicolette, and say, hey, I send you an email, a black and white email, and say, hey, I love to do business with you, you know, in your XYZ industry, check me out. The first thing you're going to do is Google my name or my company name.
Right.
And that first 30 seconds gives you probably 80% of the perception of who I am and who the company is. And if you're not there to be seen at all as a salesperson or as a company, you're not going to get the opportunity to get any seat at the table to, oh, wait a minute, or Dorian, my screen behind me is changing. It's like, it's on AI. It's got AI going, just kidding. Any seat at the table to get the opportunity to even to you to listen to me, or to even get a business opportunity for me to quotation or my company to quote you on some project you're working on.
Right.
Well, and I think back to your point of humanization, right? It's like you're not just, first of all, you're not just educating them and, you know, the business, you know, that you're in, right? It's you're educating them on the business overall, you know, on the industry. And that becomes where it becomes very humanistic. And also too, you know, look, people, I think to your point, like you send out this email and it's sort of this blank email, right? Versus, okay, now I'm dealing with Rob Tavi's company. You know, versus, so there's some personality also associated with the company, not just, oh, okay, here it's a company that wants to sell me some stuff, right? It's someone who's educating me, who's sharing with me, who's trying to make the industry better, you know?
Right. Correct. And at the end of the day, we have to come together and build, and especially in times, we're in a transition period that will never go back to what it was. We're going to be in a hybrid virtual world. We'll be traveling, things will happen, but we're moving forward. We're constantly moving forward. And at the end of the day, we're humans. We need to connect. We thrive off connection, off human interface or some version of it, because we all have feelings. We all have certain things we want to do. And that's, for me, that was the number one thing, is I'm putting myself out there, showing I'm a real person. Our company is a real company.
Mhm.
And I would love to see if there's opportunity to add some value to your company. At the end of the day, it's like, who is our why? And I want to explain to everybody what is my why, what's IBS Electronics why, and how we can partner up with other companies that, that we can add value, that at the end of the day, they make money, everybody wins. At the end of the day, it's a win-win for everybody. We want to be able to add a solution, comes to engineering, comes to the distribution, to the supply chain. And through video, through podcast, building awareness. And the number one thing is education. Once you educate people, you build credibility.
Absolutely.
That's right.
And
No,
for those who say you're not going to fail, just remember, haters are just fans. They just don't know it. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, you can get, as I said, it's funny is the thing is you can get 99 likes and 1 dislike, and all you care about is that
I know.
dislike,
Yes.
Yeah.
right?
They're fans. They just don't know it. That's how I look at it. Keep it positive.
Yeah. So let me ask you, how has IBS been doing over this year? I mean, a lot of companies, and we were talking before we started chatting, live, but how are you guys doing over there with everything that's going on this year?
Oh, to be honest with you, we're down 15% from last year. To be overall, we are down. I'm not going to say anything about it. Be honest about it. We did have some targets that we had for this year because we were going into it we had a high trend. We had a lot of bookings out for Q1, Q2. Q1, Q2 wasn't bad for it because we had a lot of existing orders. Of course, the medicals, upsurge, a lot of things did help us Q1, Q2, but we got hit in Q3. Q3 was a down quarter for us, and it was surprising because we thought, but there was a lot of, I would say, indirect causes of that. The contracts, because medical companies got cut because they don't need as much ventilators or equipment as they needed before. They didn't realize it. A lot of things came into play on that, and it depends upon what country. So Q4 is picking up for us a bit now going into 2021 because there's allocation, lead times are going out, capacity issues. But overall, yeah, that's really where we were at 15%. And I would say the US got hit hard, but there's some industries are recovering now, but it took them longer to recover, especially the automotive. Industrial was thriving, but I think it all depend upon what sector. And you can have all the sectors, but it's just defining because some industrial are not doing well, some are just thriving. It just depends upon how you break that down. But overall, companies down 15%. Asia got hit. COVID was a big thing. Factories, capacity issues, workers. But I'm optimistic. But that business will trend because electronics, at the end of the day, is especially being virtually or in this new hybrid model we're in, is going to be used more and more in all the things we're in. That's what computing, PCs, all this is. It's getting more and more powerful.
We've had this conversation recently with a few people. It's in everything. Everything these days has pretty much some electronic component to it. Now, I have a question though, because we were speaking to someone else and they were talking about it wasn't just the pandemic. Like for instance, the US had the most hurricanes. Like the weather has been crazy too, and created a lot of delays and disruption, even in supply chain also this year.
Yeah, you put it this way: is natural disasters are also number one. I mean, pandemic could be actual as a disaster, but natural disasters are too. Hurricanes, anything, earthquakes, fires. These type of things happen. Globally, and these are major disruptors for supply chain. Right, major disruptors for supply chain, which changes. At the end of this, is the booking, book to bill. Right, all these companies, especially public companies, it's like how much can we book to bill this quarter? If there's a fire, it's a disruption. They can't get the components. They can't ship. So it causes business to come down. These are a lot of disruptors in the marketplace. And I think right now, a lot of companies are stepping back and saying, wait a minute, we are not prepared for this. For a business, as I say, BCP or business continuity plan is very new for a lot of people in the world today. In our industry, I think it's been there because a lot of customers we've been from 4 or 5 years into business with them, they have to have business continuity programs. What happens if you have a fire, or what happens if there's an earthquake or a natural disaster and your warehouse can't ship anything?
Right.
What can you do? Where is your redundancy program? Where do you have other warehouses? How can you back up? And of course, now it's digital. are you backed up in the cloud? How do you back up your thing? And so for us, we're a smaller organization, but we've learned from a lot of these. That's why as a team up, these big corporations, these big billion-dollar corporations, they've showed us the way and taught us that, hey, you have to have this in place. You have to have this in place. You have to have this in place. So it's really showed us the future, what's happening. And oh, sorry, my dog is going crazy. Oh, sorry about that. Oh, Dougie, this is what happens when you live in a virtual world. Dougie, this is what happens in a virtual world. That's what happens in a virtual world.
So good.
Yeah, my dog. The problem is he doesn't leave my side. He's with me on everything I do. So what happens? Yeah, someone moves. But anyways, moving forward for that supply chain, that's really what I see. I think this pandemic has caused us to make our supply chain much more powerful and redundant, and using AI, using all the integrations, and having business continuity plans with different locations, so we don't have fires. Like an example, the AKM fire for the Japan, who does all the DACs, all the crystals. That's a massive disruption.
Right.
And people don't realize that these massive disruptions, because these factories can't get their product out, causes allocation. So up to a year now. So what are we going to do? We can't just jump to another factory. We need to do qualifications. There's a lot of processes. So it's funny, as much as we're advanced, we're also sometimes not so much advanced.
Right. So with this, so distributors are working on this redundancy, right? And making sure they get it. Is there anything that engineers, the people designing stuff, need to sort of think about in the future for natural disasters, or, God forbid there's another pandemic or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, is there something they need to think about?
So that's a great question, because we're not a tier one distributor. Tier one distributor is $1 billion Aero, Avnet, all the big guys out there, right? We're tier two, we're smaller, but we're a solution provider. And that's what our company does, is to provide our engineering support that we have, is to provide a solution to the AVLs, approved vendor list, for any type of bill or bill of materials. So as our company is, for example, our company takes a bill of materials and say, okay, you only have one or two or one, and we'll add, from our engineering side, we'll add some different components from active or passive electromechanical to help them have redundancy, or have them split allocation, right, to their manufacturers. It's like, hey, we can't put all our eggs in one basket. We need to make sure that the engineering side can do this. And it's funny, as you would say, as engineers, I've worked with many engineers in the last 20 years. A lot of them don't like change. They don't like to change the library, right?
Yeah, I think everyone could agree on that. Even the engineers listening.
Yes. Right? They have their libraries. They just pull and make their gadgets, and they go. And then it comes to commodity and sourcing to go back. And then that becomes the conflict. Okay, hey, we can't put all this. We need to add to our AVL. Comes to also sourcing, also costing, and all these things. So the top management is now pushing down, saying, hey, we need to go through all our single source lines, make sure that we have multiple AVLs. And these companies that we qualify, we need to figure out where they're producing it, because we don't want to put it in the same location that this factory has. Of course, China makes 70% of the products in the world. I mean, we know that. I mean, it's heavily, and it's a big country. But the tariffs, again, that's what doesn't matter. It hit hard. So now a lot of offshoring, onshoring is changing. But we want to make sure that we can team up with a company that has different facilities in different regions that we can use to be able to make sure, if this is something happens to Japan, we can go to Thailand, or we can go to US, or we can go to Mexico, and they can, within a week or 2 weeks, they can, change allocation, get the products made there. So, but it's not as easy to say, because a lot of comes to natural resources. Like that. But these are the ways of engineering for our company, is to educate the engineers, work with them, say, okay, we'll do the work for you. We'll give us a form functional replacement for that AVL. We'll do everything until the point goes audit, and the factory audits get in place, and these types come in place. So that's really what I think for the engineering side, for everybody should be learning. Engineers, supply chain, everybody. During a pandemic, we need to figure out how to make sure that we have business continuity programs in our bill of materials, in our operations, in our factories, through and through.
Well, I guess that kind of leads into what I was going to ask about lead times then. I mean, we did talk about, we touched on this briefly, but I mean, lead times. So, we know the industry has been experiencing some longer lead times, right? And so I guess would you say that that's kind of the answer to that question as well? Or, how are we supposed to handle those going
I mean,
forward?
that's a 30,000 foot view. There's a lot more work from that. But yeah, I mean, the lead times, of course, we're all facing lead time issues. A lot of our customers, I mean, especially in the military or defense right now, especially in the States, because we're feeling a lead times are 52 weeks. They're going out even farther. It used to be 20, 30 weeks, sometimes over a year. Some of these products are special made. And that's a challenge for companies who are trying to scale and trying to get things out. But that's just aerospace defense. Imagine you get into automotive, our famous handsets. These are the number one things that we use in the world, and there are shortages going through that. And then imagine get down to the small tier 3 manufacturers who are making some gadget, industrial, high mix, low volume. They don't have that spend to be able to get allocation of product. They're just in the bottom. They trickle down, buy through online catalogs or the big distributors, and the lead times. What that causes is loss of revenue because they can't get it out. So it's as much as we're trying to work with the top guys, our company is, we're trying to work with the smaller guys as well, educate them. Hey, even though you're only spending $20,000 a year on this one product, you need to add an AVL, because if you can't get that product, lead time go out 30, 40 weeks. How can you can't ship your product? So use an alternative that you can minimize that downtime. And that's the number one thing with the allocation. I don't see allocation right now, lead times shortening. I think they're going to get greater into Q1 and Q2. And I think we're going to see some major allocations again into MLCCs, into the MOSFETs. The dies have a shortage because there's going to be an upsurge in 2021. As soon as the pandemic goes, this vaccine comes, people start working, getting out more. The aerospace market starts moving, transportation starts moving even faster and faster. And but people don't realize that transportation is now at a massive surge for moving products, because we all order stuff to our homes, right? And they want to figure out how to make it more efficient. Let's go electric. Let's put more components in there and make it electric. So there's more of a driving demand, which automotive is tier 1. They're going to get the components first until the tier 1 to tier 2, tier 3s get it. So these are all very things we're challenging. And for us, we're trying to face that too, is educate our customers. Of course, we want to stock products, but you can't stock everything. And it's just at the end of the day, is building awareness, talking to it openly, having things like this, talking to engineers, talking to supply chain. Hey, we want to help and build awareness that the lead times are going out. And what happens when lead times goes out? Pricing goes up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Price elasticity. It's just economics, guys. People don't have supply and demand.
Yeah. I mean, side note, I heard like that delivery trucks are completely sold out. Like no one could get any sort of delivery trucks, like Amazon, FedEx, like completely sold out. Like there was none to be had.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. People say, why do you talk to your FedEx guys so much? I ask all our suppliers and our principals, what's going on in their companies that will build information. Hey, yeah, we have this, we have shorter, we can't get trucks, we have businesses. I'm like, wait a minute. And then be honest. Then I'll go backwards and say, okay, who's supplying the components or the things to this, right?
Yeah.
I'm a business guy.
Talk to your FedEx guy.
Yeah, talk to my FedEx guy.
I really like him.
my
He's a
FedEx
good guy.
Oh man, that's why Rob and I get along so well. We just talk to like the randomest people on the street. Yeah, I'm the same way. I talk to everyone.
I mean, as a person, as I say, I think, Brian, because you're curious. We're all curious. Curiosity is what drives us to move forward and innovate. If we're not, at the day we're not curious, is like we're not going to go, and we're going to be. That's it. We're done.
You're done.
Curiosity sometimes kills the cat, but sometimes creates massive innovation and footsteps to move forward.
I was going to tell everybody where we can find you, but it's right there behind you.
I have my own as I said, people, no business cards these days, just go to my website. You'll find it. We're all moving forward. Business cards, I'm like, just go to my website and you can contact me anyway, any message, email. And that's really where we're transitioning to these days. It's digital, and I would say 10 years from now, we're going to 5 years. I mean, 1 year, we advance 5 years, in my opinion. Imagine what happens in the next 5 years ahead.